Let's join Seattle A-list guitarist John Morton as he demonstrates the sounds and uses for the various pickup selections on a Stratocaster and a Les Paul. John's playing whatever comes to mind when he hears the sound. Notice how each sound inspires a different type of playing. I've worked with John several times live and in the studio. He is a very quick study. If you're in the studio, you better be recording the first time an excellent player like John runs a tune down, because the initial rundown is very likely to be the most musical and powerful take. In our first examples, John plays a Fender Stratocaster, which has 3 single-coil pickups with a 5-position pickup selector. When positioned all the way down to position 1, the bridge pickup is selected, sometimes called the treble pickup because it captures the most amount of edgy highs. In the next position up, position 2, the neck and middle pickups are selected, which produces a hollow, funky sound. Most players refer to the sound as out of phase because of that hollow sound. Technically, the pickups aren't wired out of phase, but they definitely sound out of phase because of the short distance between the pickups. The middle position selects the middle pickup alone for a thicker, full-range sound. Position 4 selects both the middle and neck pickups for a throaty, hollow sound. The combination of the 2 close pickups is usually called out of phase because of the sound, but again, the pickups are actually wired in phase. Position 5, the neck position, selects the pickup closest to the guitar neck for a deep, clear, throaty tone.
You're asking about pickup positions. The treble pickup can be used for anything from a clean rock and have a heavy guitar against it or whatever, or like a country. The next position is in between the bridge and middle position, and generally it would be a funkier thing, you know. Out of phase. Kind of funkier, and also good for country. Something like that. And then the middle position, which isn't real popular with a lot of guys, just this pickup, works good for like slide guitar things I've found. Also kind of funky in this case. And then the next position is between the neck and the middle pickup. And it's another one of the funky quacker guys. And then the neck alone is generally good for jazzular sort of things. But you also do like always thought I should do something with that, but anyway, it'd never work. But it's good for that sort of stuff, I think, and just and then some of these, I don't know, in the distorted mode might not be quite as articulated distinctive, I guess you might say. That's the funky position in a clean mode, but and then here's where if you got a slide, I don't have it handy. A little thicker. That's the middle position. Here's these two out of phase. I call that sort of a bulbous tone. It's not real distinct and clear in a way, but it's good for some things. And then, of course, the And of course, there's a million different distortion levels you can go to. In this particular guitar, I have what's called a Strat Presence Control, which is a variable mid-range boost. So if you're like, and you want a little more meat like a humbucker, I tend to open that for solo line. And here's without it. And if you can vary that, you know, like. But I tend to use it full out. Kind of. But then when you go back to rhythm, might be too thick, and it's nice to, sometimes too much dirt actually defeats the purpose, so I'll back it up. On its own, doesn't sound quite as powerful, but in a band, it's a little more clarity and works. So that's just an option this particular guitar has. But and of course, you can do it in the bass. You know. Or back it off. More of the Strat type tone there. So it's just a flexibility option.
Now, John shows us the basic sounds delivered by a Les Paul. This guitar has push-pull pots on the tone controls that switch the double-coil humbucking pickups to single-coil, mimicking the sound of a Strat in many ways.
We're in the neck position on a humbucking guitar, but it has split-coil capabilities. Just quickly, you can hear that. There's a single coil position, split coil. Little cleaner sound for doing that sort of thing. Not as good for that, so. Nice for that kind of thing. Here's both humbuckers in full-out humbucking mode together, which is on a humbucker-equipped guitar. If you want to get funky, I find this position to be. You get a little spank out of it. It's not a Stratocaster, but. that kind of thing going on. And then here's the bridge pickup. Pretty aggressive. Split the coil. Gives you that option. You can get a little crisper, funkier, a little more attack and definition. But then if you want to solo and get back to the full-on position, and except you hit all the notes, hopefully. A little. That's cool to get a thinner sound like that for just really. And then if you want to get rowdy, back to that, the full-on position. Okay, here we're in a more overdriven mode on the amplifier. So in full humbucker mode, you can hear where little meteor, and then single coil. It's nice, but it's thinner and just a little more dynamic option. Because kind of hear the bloom, I guess you might call it. With the overdriven sound, this position is kind of mushy. I'm not sure. I think with a slide, it might be cool. I kind of like a darker, thicker sound for slides. And of course, then even in that mode, you can go single coil. Take some of the mush out of it, and then that's the single coil in this, full on that. This guitar has those options. And then of course back off the volume. It's nice for doing that, and open it up again. And of course, and actually you might not even want that much dirt for those sort of things. Leave it full out and do single coil. A little more toothy.
And now, watch as I run through a few EQ principles for electric guitar. There are a few common things that we look at with electric guitar. One is how much low end is there, how much low end is needed, and what can we do about it. Also on electric guitar, a lot of times there's a high frequency edge that's a little bit difficult to mix. So we might want to tone that down. Sometimes the sounds are too full in the mid-range and we want to clean that up, or maybe they're not full enough in the mid-range. Everything that we do depends on the music that we're doing it with. So let's listen to this electric guitar sound. Listen to the low end, the mid-range, and the high end. So obviously just one of those stereotypical pad kind of distorted sounds. The first thing I usually like to do with electric guitar is set up a high-pass filter. This high-pass filter has a variable slope, and I like a pretty steep slope. And I'll sweep this high-pass filter up so that it starts to trim away at the low end. I always want to find that spot where it starts to sound a little bit thinner, and then back it off a little bit. So let's listen. So right in there is where it's starting to sound thinner, and that's 178 hertz. One of the things, especially in a live environment, that we have problems with is leakage between all the microphones. This guitar might not sound any different if we sweep this high-pass filter up, but the result of that high-pass filter is going to be that it really trims out leakage in the low end. So the mic stand that holds the guitar mic is probably sitting on the floor. And the bass drum, bass guitar, and any rumble that comes through the floor are being transmitted to that microphone. As I play this, and I'll go in and out on this high-pass filter, listen to the difference. So you can hear some stuff go away down there. What we're getting in the mix is everything above that. We want to clean out areas so that we can put what we really want in there. And then the next thing that I would listen for is that kind of grind in the high frequency that's a problem. So I like to use a technique that's called seek and destroy. What we do with this technique is we set up a boost, a very narrow boost, and sweep that boost up and down through the frequency spectrum until we find the most annoying sound we can possibly find. And that's usually what's causing the problem. And at that point, once you've found it, you just change the boost to a cut. So let's try this with this guitar. Okay, right there. I think I found it. I at least found one. Sometimes you can do this a few times and really smooth out a track. But now listen as I turn this boost into a cut. Now I'll bypass it. It's subtle to a certain extent, but you can really hear the change. Just trimming this frequency, 2.34 kilohertz by 7 or 8 dB, makes a big difference in the sound. And one of the things that you'll find is that a dynamic microphone on the dust cover of a speaker tends to have more of that frequency than you'd like. Finding it, decreasing it a little bit, helps blend the guitar and the mix a lot better. The other range that we need to assess is that low mid range. We need to decide whether or not we want to clean up the track or maybe we want to fill out the track in the low mids. Either way. So listen as I trim and boost the low mid range. What we do with that range completely depends on the music. That's a pretty standard approach to EQing electric guitar. Sometimes we'll use the low-pass filter and trim off high frequencies that we don't really need. I don't always do that, but that is a pretty common technique. So with that, we would do the same thing we did with the high-pass filter. I'd still like a pretty steep slope. I mean, I'm just trying to trim off everything above a certain point. maybe you can hear a little bit of change when I bring that in and out, but not too much. Really, the essence of the guitar is there, and there's not a lot of super high frequency content in that kind of guitar sound. It's the same benefit that you get when you use a high pass filter to trim the low frequencies. Whatever leakage is coming through, whether it's cymbals or sibilance or room sound or whatever it is, it's diminished when you use the low pass filter, same as with the high pass filter. In most mixes, we're really trying to create that scenario where we're not adding material that we don't need in the low end or the high end. We're focusing on the frequencies we do need in that usable range. When we're trying to highlight areas, wider bandwidths work better. Wider bandwidths are like tone controls. Narrow bandwidths are usually for fixing problems. With a clean guitar sound, you might find exactly the same problems that we just addressed with the distorted guitar. There might be a low-end problem. There might be a high frequency that's annoying and grating, and you'll definitely need to address what you do with the mid-range so that it will fit with the rest of the mix. This is a nice, clean guitar sound. There's not too much that's really wrong with it, so our EQ changes will be more about tone shaping than problem solving. We still want to address the low end, so a high-pass filter is really the way to go. So listen to this guitar track as I sweep up from the bottom with this high-pass filter. Obviously, that's too thin, so now I will sweep back down until it still sounds natural, but I know that I'm carving out some of the unnecessary low frequencies. Now watch as I press the bypass button and listen to what it is we're actually removing. We took quite a bit out at first, and I moved it back down a little bit just because that low A wasn't really ringing through. But in reality, the first setting is probably what would be best for most mixes. Bass guitar and keyboards will be more than capable of covering those low frequencies, and thinning that electric guitar out might be the thing that makes it fit perfectly in the mix with everything else. Listen as I find a mid-range frequency to boost and cut. Notice when I boosted down in the low end, it felt fuller in the low end. But when I took the same control and sweeped it up to 572 hertz and turned it into a cut, it still sounded stronger in the low end, but it sounded cleaner in the mid-range. That kind of move is very standard. We're always creating holes in certain instruments that we can fill with other instruments. Sometimes it's a good idea to sweep down with a low-pass filter just to make sure that you don't have any extra content in those upper frequencies. You can hear that when I bypass this EQ in those upper frequencies, there's not too much of a difference. So there's not really much content up in the high end. And finally, we might find a frequency in the high end to highlight just as a tone control, a wide bandwidth just to give this track a little bit more air. A sound like that would fit well in most mixes. Notice when I go in and out of the EQ, when I press the bypass button, that the sound cleans up in the mid-range. When I bypass, everything seems a little bit cloudier. Even though I would think that these EQ moves would make this track fit better in most arrangements, it really comes down to the specific song and what else is going on in the texture. Our job is just to know the options that we can use to shape the sound to fit with the rest of the mix.